everybody, welcome to my channel. I have my iPad here taking some notes. So today I want to answer the question, do personality systems put you in a box? One, people only know the 4-letter dichotomies. They're like, I'm an ISFP or an ENTJ. They don't know about the cognitive functions. So right off the bat, there is a surface level understanding that they have, and they're like, this is shallow. This doesn't describe me at all. I have way more depth to me than this. This is just so shallow. And it does seem really shallow. And it's like, why would you want to reduce yourself down to this thing that is like relatively shallow? But it can never be as intricate as you are. There are billions of people on the earth, and there are only 16 personality types. When you think of the example of Myers Briggs. For the Enneagram, there's only 9. For astrology, there's only 12. However, when you get down to the more complex version of these systems, there are so many more types when you get down to the more complex versions of these systems. And it's not meant to say, okay, here's an INTJ, Alexis is fitting in this box, and that is all it is. What I see it rather is like, this is Alexis, and one aspect and one dimension of Alexis is being an INTJ. And it's not like I have to fit into INTJ, but the INTJ fits into my world. Then I add in another system like the Enneagram, which will describe a different facet of me. And then I add in astrology, which describes a different facet of me. And when you get all of these working together, they're still not even going to describe you perfectly because you're an intricate person. But what they do is they give language, they give growth points, blind spots, good and bad, by the way. They teach you, like, they reveal strengths that you didn't know you had. And once they say it, people around you are like, oh yeah, you totally have that. And you're like, wait, I did? Like, blind spots, strengths, it just reveals things to you just because it gives language to things that are not in our everyday vocabulary. Things like introversion and extroversion have made it into the everyday vocabulary, so people kind of talk about it like we're introverts or extroverts. But things like intuition and sensor, that is not in our everyday vocabulary. So when you learn something like that, you're like, oh yeah, this gives new language to what I am, a new dimension to who I am, and it kind of makes you feel understood, and then you can understand people a little bit better because it resonates with you more. This is something I recommend you make for yourself. The 3 main systems that I have found helpful in my life for differing reasons are Myers Briggs, Enneagram, and astrology. None of which on their surface level have I found helpful. So I just want to get that out of the way real quick. Like if I say, hey, I'm a Scorpio, I don't find that to be very interesting, your sun sign. If I say I'm a introvert, intuitive, thinker, judger, I don't find that to be as interesting. You can get value from those things, but they're not as interesting as when you like dig a little deeper. For some reason, I'm feeling like astrology is going to be a controversial point, but whatever, more the merrier. Okay, so for example, I'll take you through like how like I fill this out personally. So I'm going to fill this out in strengths that I didn't realize I had, but after using the system, realized it was there, and that was verified by people around me. And I'm also going to write down growth points that I didn't know before I knew about the system, growth paths that I should take. And after following these growth paths, I have found them to be useful and they've benefited my life. So I'll have to say that I've kind of tested these out and they've been helpful, and I didn't know what they were beforehand. So the immediate one that comes to mind right off the bat is before Myers Briggs cognitive functions, I did not understand intuition and sensing, and it gave me language to understand what intuition is, and it helped me realize why conversations fall flat when I mention a pattern. People are always mentioning the one counterexample that I didn't mention. It helped me realize like why I'm not so detail-oriented. I think a lot of times when they would talk about these kind of like type A organized people, I didn't quite fit into that. I mean, I kind of fit into the type A organized person with the TJ aspects, the ITJ aspects, but this N is something that's really different than how they talk about type A personalities. And so that was something very beneficial to me to realize that we're like using this part of the brain. If you've read Dario Nardi's book, that is all about like metacognition and about seeing pictures and patterns and metaphors. And that was so helpful. I mean, I cannot iterate enough how helpful it was understanding what introverted intuition is. Even just figuring out that there are N's, like that was huge in and of itself. But to know what introverted intuition versus extroverted intuition was huge and something to leverage. Another thing I didn't realize, like to leverage this kind of strength and a growth path was like TE. My whole life it kind of felt like TE was squashed down. Like, don't be a leader, don't be too loud, don't be too bossy. And I really kind of like shrunk that part of myself and would kind of apologize for it to people until I learned about this. And now it's something that, like, because I know about it, because my husband knows about it, he like encourages it a lot more. My friends encourage it a lot more than they would have if they didn't know. One thing I didn't realize was like a growth point is like FI. I had been in an FI loop for an entire year, a pretty like severe one, I would say. And then I learned about this, and that was kind of like the catalyst that helped me like get out of that funk and realize, no, I need to be productive. I need to get things done. I'm at my best. And when I think back to some of my happiest moments, I was in leadership roles. I was kind of changing the way the system was done, revamping things and kind of charging forward. And that was when I was at my best, and I realized that I hadn't been like that. So that was so helpful to learn that for me, being in my introverted feelings is not the best spot for me to be. And then I also learned that kind of SE is a growth point. There wouldn't be a candle sitting here. I wouldn't have an iPad right here. This background wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have makeup on. I wouldn't have cared what shirt I was wearing if I hadn't started working on SE. I should include kind of a snippet of what it was like before I used to work on SE, but I used to be kind of like all meat, no sizzle. And I really have learned to look into the camera and to animate my face and to talk quicker and things like that. Naturally, it wasn't like that. Naturally, I'm kind of always looking through things, and I still do. I still always look at my videos, and I'm still kind of like looking like over here a lot of the time, looking through things, not at things, talking slowly. You guys don't see it because of editing, but there are so many pauses, and it does not come off as quick necessarily in real life as the finished product looks on camera. But I hate watching dominant NI users on YouTube, probably because I am one. It's kind of difficult to watch other people, so I was like, I'm not going to be like that. So this is me kind of utilizing that. I just made a video about developing SE and TE, so if you're interested in that, you can take a look. But yeah, so those are kind of like the main things that I learned, and it really helped me. You know, there are some people in my life, I should actually write that as growth, like FE and SI. I don't have, like, I don't care about any of those SI-FE things, and I'm around a lot of people that do, and so that was really beneficial for me to realize how I can communicate more. The next one that I learned about after Myers Briggs was the Enneagram. Once again, I don't like when people use systems to say, oh, I'm a type 2, so I do this. Like, that does sound like putting people in boxes, and I don't ever want to sound static. Like, I'm a type 2, so I do this. The point is to transcend type. So the healthier you get, the less you seem like a 2. And they have growth points and growth paths. And one growth point was like, there's huge energy management. And I didn't realize that I had such a strong desire to conserve energy. But as soon as I read that, I was like, I am constantly trying to conserve energy all the time. I don't want to talk. I don't want to move. I just want to like sit still all the time and think. And it comes from this belief that I feel like I'm running out of energy. So that has been a huge belief to dismantle. I mean, that has not been dismantled. I don't feel like I've made significant growth. And that's part of my issue with the Enneagram, is I don't feel like there are as tangible steps for growth. Besides that, they say to become more like, in my case, a 7 and 8. It's like you go against the arrow first, and then you go with the arrow. And to me, it's so interesting because these systems start running together, and I start kind of seeing like all the patterns like within the systems. Like being more like an 8 sounds like TE to me, and being more like a 7 sounds like SE to me. And you could make different cognitive functions comparisons besides just those, but they start kind of running together, and it starts gelling with this person. Like, this is who Alexis is, and no matter what system we're looking at, the message is you need to be more extroverted and get out there. And it has been so helpful for me to extrovert my thoughts more, to take a stand, show more authority. That's something I shied away from for the longest time. But I'm starting to like give pushback. Like if I don't agree with something, I'm starting to kind of stick up for it more. And I feel like more of myself. And I feel like people know me more because they're hearing my thoughts more. So I think that's been so beneficial. Also, one thing like I learned about the wings. So like 5 wing 4. And with the Enneagram, it's so cool. They call that bottom of the Enneagram like the existential hole. And I was like, yes, that's exactly what I feel. Like, I can imagine 5s and 4s have the sense of nihilism that's like, oh, everything is pointless, woe is me, that sort of stuff, if we can tend to get in loops. I think that is so interesting. But that 4 wing kind of demonstrates, like, to me, it kind of shows a little bit of FI. It's like I have a little bit of this FI flavor that's like, I care about emotions. I care about like the way things look. You know, they talk about Enneagram 4s being very artistic and wanting to stand out and kind of be different. And I feel like that kind of shows how my like NI and FI show up together. So that's been very interesting. And to say that there's like a balance between thinking and feeling, I always kind of felt like in the split between thinking and feeling. And you can tell because it's like my second and third function. Those are going to be the closest together. And then also being a 5-wing 4, they're close together. And so I like the parallels that I draw between the systems. So it encourages me to get out there more, to try new things, to not think so hard about things, and basically to be more extroverted. And so just like with the other system, if it turns out that the Enneagram is like all false, it came from terrible origins, you know, whatever the worst possible scenario is, it's still been helpful in my life. Not quite as helpful as Myers Briggs, but it has been very helpful. And then finally, down into astrology. This is something that's new to me in probably the last 6 months. I had always known, you know, like the sun sign, what people always say, like, oh, what are you? I'm a Virgo, or, you know, whatever people say. And I was like, yeah, I'm not interested in that. I am interested in growth. That's like an NITE thing. I'm interested in personal growth. If it's going to keep me static, I don't give a rip about it. I want growth. We're charging forward. How can I be better and kind of get over my limitations and become like a streamlined person? So then at some point I was just listening to some like perfume video and she was talking about like, oh, I'm a such and such rising. And I was like, oh, what is this word? I want to like, and TE's like, I kind of want to be knowledgeable. So then I kind of looked into it and TE's like, no, we don't believe this. We don't believe in astrology. And then I was like, well, I don't know. It seems kind of interesting and kind of complex. Like, look at this chart. And TE's like, okay, yeah, look at this chart. Okay, that's interesting. But no, we don't believe in it. But then I was still kind of running the show and we're like, we're going to figure out what this thing is from these people's perspective and like, what does it mean, the intricacies and all that sort of stuff. So anyways, I got down the rabbit hole for several hours and it is so interesting. Like, if you only know your sun sign, like that is not nearly as interesting as it gets. Like, you eventually get into like where all the planets were and stuff. And I think like SE's like, no, obviously that's not true. Planets related to personality, no, it doesn't relate. But NI is kind of like, I think maybe they could relate. Anyways, so I still am not even fully decided on it because all the functions are kind of like, I don't know what do we think, do these agree? And my husband's an ISFP and he's like sold, he like thinks it exists. But I am still kind of like torn. I don't know. It just seems like it shouldn't exist. But then it's really accurate for all my family members and for myself. And the growth point makes sense. And anyways, all this stuff. I'm on the fence, but I would say I'm 80% leaning towards that I think it exists. I know why I give all this caveat, probably because there's some INTJs on this channel. And in my mind, I'd be like, INTJs are not going to believe that this exists. But whatever. So anyways, so I learned, like if you look at my chart, I have lots of Scorpio in my chart. So I'm a Scorpio sun and Scorpio rising. And I think that's one thing that made me more susceptible. Like, it just made me more likely to believe in it because my sun sign and my rising sign are the same. So when they give a description of a Scorpio, because my sun sign and rising sign are the same, I'm more likely to believe it. Whereas some people might be like a Gemini sun, but all their other planets are like not in Gemini. So it seems like really unlike them unless you like get to know them or a certain aspect or whatever. So that's been so interesting. So I eventually got like a reading that was like an hour and a half, and my husband and I listened to it and I was like, we are going to sit here and we're going to figure out if this is true or not. We're going to be rigorous. We're going to be objective. And he was like, okay, whatever. Anyways, so we listened to it and I felt like it was so accurate. And she had these growth points. And so you've got like your north node and your south node and your MC. So there are all sorts of growth points. So it's not just like this static system. I personally don't believe in like synastry, like compatibility, or using it for like horoscopes, like daily stuff or monthly predictions or anything like that. I just believe in it for the fact that you have your birth chart, it shows elements of your personality, and then you can grow from there. And then there are kind of like blind spots from there. I don't believe in it like predicting like you're going to get some physical illness or you're going to get a car this month. I don't like believe in like horoscope, that sort of stuff. If you do, it's like no big deal. I just personally haven't found it. I keep digging and digging and digging, and I just like haven't found it to really seem accurate. Anyways, I keep digressing. I feel like they need to keep giving so many caveats in this video. Anyways, so on to the point of what I was talking about. So I feel like it kind of brought out like a measure of like intensity. And I think that's kind of shown in all of these personality types. But there's really something to being like a Scorpio and Scorpio rising that really talks about, and they talk about Scorpios being so intuitive, and I feel like that really aligns. But they talk about like the intensity, and they talk about Scorpios wearing black all the time, which is so interesting that like in all these categories I fall into, they like always wear black, which is like so interesting. And they talk more about, like in the Scorpio, they talk more about like using like charisma and like your like sexual energy, and I feel like I can just relate to like when I can like channel, like turn on like an energy, it's like easier for me to talk to people when I think about it in that way, which has been something kind of interesting. I also have a lot of planets in Sagittarius, which is about philosophy and wanting to expand your horizons and learn new perspectives and travel and liking to hear like open-minded beliefs, people different than you. And I just feel like all of these things really resonate. And like when you look at my like husband's chart, it's very different, and it's more about being a musician. He's an ISFP, which totally makes sense. His whole chart is like all about being a musician, and mine's more about like communicating. My growth point is to be more like a Leo, which that totally, it makes sense. When you think about developing TE or developing SE, basically just becoming more extroverted in general, like Leo embodies that. Like that is like what you're supposed to do. That's like the embodiment of extroversion in my opinion. So it's so interesting. And it just talks about like this planet symbolizes this, and it's in this sign, which means this, and it's in this house, which means this. So anyways, my introvert intuition just like loves that sort of thing anyways, just to like understand a system. Even if I don't fully believe that the system exists, just to understand a system is just kind of fun to play around with the pieces, like where all these pieces go. This is just very brief. This Venn diagram, like I've learned so much more, but this is just kind of like my brief things that I've jotted down. And so if you can just like learn what your strengths are and what your growth points are, I think that's fantastic. And it doesn't need to put you in a box that says, this is where you are and this is where you'll always be, and you are nothing but this box. Like, you are confined in this. Like, to me, it's more like, this is where you are and this is where you could be if you keep expanding. And if you don't like the definitions and they don't resonate with you, then you can just kind of push them aside. You know what I mean? Like, don't take it if it doesn't resonate with you. But if something like resonates with you and you're like, you know what, I think that's true and I hadn't realized it before. And if people in your life can verify it, and if you try it out for a couple weeks and you feel like it's like yielding good dividends, then I don't know why you wouldn't do it. Like, I don't need a system to be proven true for it to be useful in my life. So yeah, those are kind of like the things that I've done. Let me know if you've like learned any other different systems. I have heard of Big Five and DISC. To the research I've done, they seem kind of simplistic and shallow to the research I've done. Maybe there's more to it than what I know. And then I've also done Human Design, which is a very intricate system. So it's interesting, but I just never found that it was resonating. So yeah, that's that. So those are the 3 main personality systems that I have found helpful for growth, for expanding myself. Yeah, let me know if you've found any more. Follow me on Instagram if you're interested. Thanks so much for watching.